I left that last video off at talking about the impact of a sentence being stronger than the impact of like losing all your gear. And one thing that kind of never came out as a consequence of, one thing that never came out about my sentence, it was a 10-year sentence, was how like shit my lawyer was. It was kind of hard to find a lawyer in the first place. I didn't qualify for a public assistant. I'm not sure why. At that time I was making $15 an hour and working full time, and I think I was moonlighting a little bit as a driver still, and I don't know, I guess they think that you can afford a lawyer if you're making $15 an hour, which you can afford a shitty lawyer, barely. So yeah, I paid this guy, this guy charged me $5,000, and I paid him in some installments, and I think I let my car get repoed. I had I had a car that I had a 5-year loan on, or a 3-year loan on, I don't remember. So I just let them repo it, and I started riding a bicycle everywhere, and that was how I paid for not just my lawyer, but they also had me on an ankle monitor that they were charging me like $12 a day for, or something like that, which is kind of a lot for someone who's presumed innocent until guilty. And yeah, it's a whole weird thing. And like I'm not, like, obviously, since I committed the crime, I'm not trying to bitch about like, oh, woe is me. That's not the point of what I'm saying. But anyway, so my lawyer, basically, when I told him about it, I think they had slapped, like, he said he'd never seen this many felonies for something that was not gang related, and they really broke me off. They had like 3 counts of criminal mischief, harassment. They had, obviously, all the, like, first degree arson and like 4th degree arson maybe. They had all these, they stacked like 7 or 8 or 9 things on me, and then they also stacked a possible sentence enhancer on top of that. So they were really trying to get me to plea. And I mean, I was fine with the plea because I felt horrible about what I did. And I was, I don't know, I was just really in a state of shock. I mean, I also I'd also had a suicide attempt that I committed, and I had a lot of brain fog from that for many years, because I tried to kill myself using CO2 from my car. And so yeah, I just wasn't right in the head for a long time after that. But basically my lawyer told me at every step of the way that if I pled to this and that he was pretty confident I would get either 4 years or 6 years. And the sentencing range, I think, for my crime was 4 to 12. So he was like, if he went from saying you're not going to prison for this to you might have to do a couple years to, oh, you might have to do 4 years, but don't worry, you'll get out to the halfway house in 2 years, to actually it might be 6 years, but prison's not what it used to be. And he also, so like one of the main things I think that led to my sentence at the end was, at the very end, my ex-girlfriend, so the arson was, I set basically the house she grew up in, I set that house on fire, and her dad still lived there, but she didn't. And there are a lot of competing sort of reasons why I did it in my head. I thought that I was participating in this fucking grand spiritual metaphysical thing that would have all these like different outcomes. And but one thing that never came out was that I called 911 on the fire myself, because it had gotten a lot bigger than I thought it would really quickly. And so I went to the nearest payphone, and dialed 911 anonymously. And my lawyer told me that if I mentioned this in any of the hearings or whatever, that this would just sort of muddy the waters, and it's kind of beside the point, and like I'd be seen as trying to mitigate my crime or something like that, and that it was kind of didn't matter, and that it would be kind of hard to prove anyway because I didn't identify myself. And then I'd have this whole new burden of proof where, I have to prove that I made the call and all this stuff. So I was like, fine, whatever, I won't mention it. And then at the actual hearing, my ex-girlfriend read a statement where she said, the fact that I did it, and then I'd also sent an email after I did it because I wanted to get caught. And but she said that the reason I sent it was because I had basically intended to cause harm to her father, like physical harm, which is not what I wanted to cause. And I mean, had I been thinking with my self-interest in mind, I would have said, well, the fact that I called 911 means that was not my intent. I mean, it kind of demonstrates that that was not my intent. But I wasn't thinking with my self-interest in mind. I was only thinking with kind of what's good for the peace of mind of my ex and her dad. So I was like, whatever's fair is fair. I'm going to accept the sentence. And my lawyer was telling me, what's fair is 4 to 6 years, and that's what you're going to get probably. Don't worry about the phone call thing. But right after that testimony, it's like I could tell it really affected the judge. And she went from going, this is just kind of your standard arson to, this guy is a murdering. This guy's he was lucky he didn't kill anybody, which I think is not the case because of the 911 call. But it changed the whole frame of it to the judge, and I could tell. And I didn't know what to do about that. And then I got the 10-year sentence, and then, still people don't, I don't know. Anyway, 4 years to 10 years, it's kind of a big jump, and everyone was surprised. And, including myself. Anyway, there's just kind of a thing that, I don't know if people consider this, but, I mean, if you're ever facing, it's like a psychopath has a better chance of getting a good deal in terms of their sentence than someone who thinks that they're trying to deal with the system honorably, which is what I was trying to do. I was trying to be, I turned myself in, I was trying to show remorse, I was trying to show that I felt bad for what I did, but ultimately it just made it easier for them to break me off. And so, I don't know exactly what to make of that, It means that if you can't deal with the system honorably, you have to think like a psychopath, or else you're going to get more time. Unless you're a bit of a masochist, which at that time, I mean, I was suicidally depressed. I mean, I'm not sure that I was capable of thinking, having the frame of self-interest in mind. And I mean, generally speaking, things turned out pretty good for me, so I'm not even really that broke up about it. But, I don't know. It was a pretty big shock. It was a much bigger shock than getting ripped off for 20 grand. Yeah.